Good afternoon. It's Joey Hunter again, bringing you memories from the past, people and places and things that were done, as I feel, during the golden age of modeling, which to me was starting in the 60s and leading up to the middle or the end of the 90s. And today we have an iconic guest, somebody who is renowned in the cosmetic business, one of the premier makeup artists that have had started back in the 70s. Just when I became an agent. I became an agent in 69, 70, and she seems to have started in 73. And I must say, I admire her because the competition in those days was tough, and most of your makeup people were celebrities and well known, and did a fabulous job editorially and commercially. And so let me introduce you to Sandy Linter, who has been in the business and is still in the business. Sandy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I don't see Sandy. Where are you, Sandy?
Yes, sir. The bottom right.
Oh, I have to add her. Jesus. You know, I'm getting to be a tech geek here. You know? That's it. All right, there we go. I'm in. After that fabulous introduction, I hope she heard it. Uh, I don't know why. Sandy has joined us. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Hi, Joey.
Good to see you today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I couldn't do one of these without you because I know you may have, you do have more memories than I do on a different side of the business.
I'm
Now,
behind the scenes.
behind the scenes, right?
Right.
We came, like I came from Brooklyn and you came from Staten Island. Now,
But I was born in
oh,
Brooklyn.
you were born in Brooklyn. Wow.
And I grew up on Staten Island.
Ah,
I
I see.
can't get rid of the accent.
Once the bridge was built, you went across to Staten Island, like a million of my friends did, which they're still living there to today. So tell me about you. Now, I started in 69 as an agent, and I see you started when in.
I started in 69 as a girl working behind a Bloomingdale's cosmetic counter. And that was 1969. And in 72, I went to a hair salon called Mr. Kenneth, where I met every society woman in town, including Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. I did her makeup, and I met Shirley Lord, the beauty editor of American Vogue. She did a 2-page article about me in Vogue, and that hit off my editorial career.
Yeah, well, Kenneth was well known and was really the place to go. And especially after Jacqueline Kennedy went there, it got even more and more popular. So you started there, which I didn't know, and I guess that launched your career with Glamour magazine, huh?
Vogue magazine. I never worked for Glamour. I worked directly with Vogue, Bazaar, and then eventually Cosmo. I did a few covers with Scavullo, but basically I did a lot of Vogue editorial.
You know, I see where you said you did an article for Glamour.
No, Vogue.
Oh, for Vogue. Fabulous. Well, you really you really made your way in there.
I did. I mean, it was amazing. At that time in New York City, you could be whatever your dream was to be. Because it happened to me, it could happen to anyone.
And at the time that you broke in, I mean, there were a lot of well-known, well-named hairdressers or well-known hairdressers like Joey Mills and Way Bandy. That was tough competition.
Well, It really, it was and it wasn't. In 1973, when I started doing Vogue editorials, there were only 5 makeup artists in all of New York City. And so we all worked a lot. So it really was healthy competition. It was good. I mean, everybody had work, but we were only 5. So
Andy, tell me, who were the 5? There was Way, and there was Joey.
Way, Rick Gillette,
Oh,
Joey
Rick.
Mills, a girl named, Joey Mills, me, Way Bandy, Rick Gillette, and there was one girl. I'll get it. One other girl.
Talking about Rick Gillette, I know he's all set up in lives upstate New York, and has some sort of a shop that he keeps going. You know, as we know, Way passed away, and Joey Mills passed away. So you're the keeper of all the stories and everything that went on in those days, because you were up there, and I know once I started repping women, I mean, everybody worked with you. Everybody in the business.
In those days, sure. Yeah.
Now, did you
I
do?
mean, it was fun. I worked with the best girls. As you know, there would be Janice Dickinson and her sister Debbie,
Yeah.
and Gia, and I mean, Patty Hansen, Rosie Vella. I worked with these girls every single day. I was really so lucky. And to have those beautiful faces in my hands, it was a great, great time for
Let
me.
something. Did you work not only editorial but commercially, like for Revlon and L'Oreal
Yes,
and people like?
I did. I did. I wasn't that great with my commercial work, not like a Joey Mills, who was fantastic. But I did do a few, editorial doesn't pay well. It's like $200 a day. But I was living with a guy, so I didn't need to pay my own rent. So I was okay just doing editorial. That's all I really wanted to do. And I made enough money to go to Henry Bendel's and buy fabulous clothes. And that's all I wanted out of life. So, yeah, but I did do some commercial work. Of course, whenever it came along, I was lucky to do it.
Talking about living with a guy, I notice on Facebook that I see you with a lot of hot looking guys over the years. And these were guys that I guess were before you started cosmetics, when you were younger and living in Staten Island. But I got to say, uh, they looked hot, all these
I
guys. You know, you had
mean,
grace.
Staten Island was a hotbed for Italian guys. I mean, they were almost all Italian guys, and they all had beautiful brown eyes and long eyelashes. And I mean, they were all gorgeous. And when I got to New York City, I remember thinking, hmm, the hot guys were in Staten
You
Island.
sure we didn't date when we were younger?
I did. I did. I have
But
to say.
consider myself one of those hot Italian guys, you know, back in those days.
Yes, of course.
Now, wait, I want to bring, you know, so you're living with this guy. This is going to be personal now.
Uh,
And
uh-huh.
all of a
And
sudden,
yeah,
you met Gia.
let me think if that was all of a sudden. We had broken up, me and this fabulous hairdresser I was living with. His name was Xavier. We had broken up, and I remember I went to Fire Island that summer, 1978. And I worked a lot with Chris von Wagenheim in 1978, and he invited himself to Fire Island that weekend. And he came with his camera, and he took a few shots of me nude. And then, so that's just part of the story. And then in September, that was in the summer, and then in September 1978, he booked me to do a shoot for Harper's Bazaar, and that's when I met Gia. And she was just this fabulous. I mean, I didn't know she was fabulous until she got in front of the camera. She gets in front of I made up like 4 girls. She was one of the 4 girls. She gets in front of the camera, and Chris nods at her. She has on a long black slinky dress. And when he nods at her, she shakes her shoulder and she knocks off half the dress. And she's just standing there like fabulous. And I thought, you know what? She's a star. Chris has discovered a star. And of course, Gia and Chris already knew that, but I didn't. They had been working all that summer in Italy for Italian Bazaar. So I would work with Gia occasionally from time to time. And then one day, Chris asked me if I would do this fence shot for him for his personal use, whatever it was. I said, sure. And then he said, came back in the room and he said, with Gia. And I had been working with Gia that day, so she was still in the studio. And I said, of course. And then he left the room and he came back in and he said, nude. And I thought, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So that's how I really met Gia.
Ah,
Ah.
yeah.
So then he did the fence shoot. Nobody saw this fence shoot, excuse me, until a book was published about Gia called Thing of Beauty. And the author, Stephen Fried, ran one shot of the fence shoot in his book. And then all the pictures mysteriously came out from nowhere. All of a sudden, I saw pictures I'd never seen in the last 30 years since they were taken. So anyway, but getting back to your point, yes, that's how I met Gia, through Chris von Wagenheim.
And I noticed that, was there a little more to it than just meeting and becoming good friends and working together?
On my part, no. And then Mr. Harry King, who you know, Mr.
Yeah.
Fabulous Harry King, the great hairdresser, had a party one. Oh, no, he didn't have a party. Ariella and Andrea Blanche. Ariella was a makeup artist, a fabulous makeup artist. She was one of my closest friends. And Andrea Blanche, who's a photographer, brought Gia to my apartment one night. And we were all partying, drinking, smoking, doing whatever. And we decided to go visit Harry King. It must have been 1 a.m., 2 a.m., who knows? And Harry was so sweet. I knew he would be. And we all barged in on him. And we were still partying, really crazy, wild, and reckless partying like we did in those days. And Harry brings out his video recorder and he starts videoing us. So he has little bits of this video that you can find online somewhere. And that's when Gia and I connected romantically. It wasn't when I worked with her. It was at that party. It was just one of those things.
How long did that last, Sandy?
Well, I was with her for as long as I could be with her. Let's put it that way. And so I'd say about 3 years. I met her in the end of 78, and she went back home in 1981. But during that time, I saw as much of her as I could.
Yeah.
And then her life got terribly interrupted by an addiction that we all know about.
Well, I have one story about Gia. At the end of her career, she had come to us at Ford to revive it and to sort of, nobody else wanted her really because of her problems. So I never forget the meeting with Eileen, Jerry, and myself and Gia. And she promised not to kick the habit, and she would be on time and she'd go to work. So sure enough, I think she did it for 2 or 3 days. And then one day, Eileen calls me and says, Joe, Gia hasn't shown up. But Eileen also said to Gia, the first time you screw up, you're out of here. So sure enough, she calls me. She says, G is not here. She's not showed up. So I tried calling her, and she wouldn't answer. So Eileen said, go over to her apartment to find out what's going on. I was Eileen's fire this one, fire that one.
Oh, you,
You know,
you were the guy.
dirty work. So I went over to, and she said, get rid of her. So I went over to her apartment, knocked on the door. Sure enough, she let me in, and she was out of it. And I said, I'm sorry, G, we tried, and it's not going to work. And I left, and that was the only story I have of her. And then the rest is history.
Yeah.
Uh, it was sad because she was a beauty,
Oh,
and she really did a super job. And as you say, I think when she got on camera and when she was dressed up, she blossomed.
she was
Whereas
a star.
she was pretty, but she wasn't this gorgeous thing that came across on camera. Now, let me ask you something. You mentioned Fire Island. Now,
I
that's a
love
source.
Fire Island.
Back in the 70s, we all went to Fire Island. Everybody went to Fire Island. Nobody knew of the Hamptons. It was Fire Island. 60s and 70s, everybody went to Fire Island. And the Pines was the place to go because all the clients, the hairdressers, models, and designers all went there. It was very gay, the Pines, at
Yes,
that point.
completely gay
Very gay.
and
Uh,
fabulous.
and it was a fun place to go to
Fun
because
place.
it was full of gay guys who didn't show they were gay. They didn't act gay compared to Cherry Grove.
Well,
Cherry
that's not my
was
recollection. My
America.
recollection was the Pines when I went in '78. That the gay culture there was so beautiful. I mean, everything was fastidious. The homes were gorgeous and everything was just fabulous. And I remember Cherry Grove were mostly lesbians.
And it was the fun spot.
It was fabulous. Yes, it was fabulous too,
I remember
but very opposite, very different.
when I was going back, I guess it was the 60s, and I was going to Fire Island. The Pines was very conservative gay. And,
The
everybody,
60s. Wow.
and as a matter
Wow.
of fact, it changed where I remember the tea dances.
Oh,
Uh,
the tea dances were fabulous.
but when I went, it was very conservative, and we used to go to Cherry Grove. So now, sometimes I stayed in the Pines with friends, and sometimes, most of the time, I stayed in Seaview or Ocean Beach,
Uh-huh.
where we had
Family. That's a family.
that's a family
Right.
place. We used to go to Cherry Grove to have fun and dance.
Right.
Crazy because everybody was dressed in different outfits, and man, it was fun. And we went there because we were straight, and we loved all the women that were there because they were there with the gay guys, and it was easy picking to make out with them.
Okay. All right. You had an angle. I could see it. You had an angle. Good for you. Anyway, Fire Island. If
It
you
was
live in New York and you haven't been to Fire Island, you have to go. I mean, it's just a pleasure.
it's a gorgeous place. It's the best beach I've ever seen in the world,
oh,
and the idea of walking,
no
no
cars. I love it.
bicycle and wagons.
Right. The
Take it
wagon
to the
door.
supermarket and you take it back, and it was really something special. So tell me, now you're in the business.
I'm in the
You're
business.
working for all this editorial,
Uh-huh.
all right? And you're doing makeup. What were the trends there for makeup? In when you started.
Well, when I first started, I would always look at the British Vogue, Italian Vogue. I looked at the European magazines. I thought the American magazines, the makeup was a little boring. I liked a more edgy look And so I think when they hired me to do a job editorially, they would hire me specifically to make a girl look either sexier, which I love doing, or edgier. And so that I could do a lot with Patty Hansen. That was just a no-brainer. And Rosie Bella, just pure beauty. And I did work with Gia off quite a bit, a little bit, not a ton. But Gia, after I had more of a relationship with her, I really was not that comfortable doing her makeup because I felt she looked more beautiful without makeup. So sometimes you form a relationship with people, and being a makeup artist, you lose that thing where you can transform them. You don't want to. So, but with Patty Hansen, her face was my palette. Rosie Bella, her face was my palette. Those two girls really stand out to me as being girls that my makeup worked well on, and I did well with them. I got a lot of pages with them.
Those two girls were beautiful in their own right,
Oh,
but
very.
I've got to say, when they put makeup on, they became really gorgeous. Where other girls, you know, makeup, no makeup, they pretty much look the same, you know. Makeup enhanced them, but didn't do what it did for those two girls. Rosie, I hear, is living in California. I haven't heard from her in a while. We represented Rosie way back when she was going out with Peter Max. Matter of fact,
well, Rosie Bella has a pretty good Instagram, and she's been posting pictures about Peter recently.
Yeah, it's sad. I heard Peter's got a little dementia or something like that, and my prayers are with him. He was really a super guy, and he was always nice to us. He had a terrible habit of signing posters and giving them to us. And that habit cost us a lot of money because we have to frame them then and put them, because he'd come in and say, "Where's my poster I gave you last week?"
Yeah, but aren't they worth something now?
I hope so. I hope so. You know, I'm sure my kids are going to grab them, you know.
I'm sure.
But yes, the Peter Max days. And another thing is,
somebody wants me to talk about Veronica Hamill, so can I do that for 1 second?
Veronica, I love her. I used to go.
Talk about a woman who was so beautiful in person. I did a beach shoot with her in 1975 for, I think it was Vogue. And on the beach, she has this beautiful blue bikini on, and I put blue eyeshadow on her from here to here. And she was like a statue. Rico Pullman took the photo, and it is in museums today. Veronica Hamill was amazing. And Jerry Hall, you want to go first, Joey? Talk about Jerry.
I got a Jerry Hall story. I mean, I could tell Jerry Hall stories. But getting back to Veronica. Veronica came from Philadelphia, and she was living in New York, and she was going out with a good friend of mine who was a male model a long, long time. And I had married a girl by the name of Nina Renshaw back in the 70s. And we then started double dating together. We'd go here, we'd go play tennis down in Jersey, because Mike had rented a house, or she and Mike had rented a house. And so she became very, very close to me and to my wife at that time. Then she started acting, and she got acting roles. And believe it or not, I haven't seen her since, you know. Not a word. I've spoken to her ex a few times, but I haven't heard from her. And then last night, well, one night I saw an old movie with her in it, or a new movie.
Yeah.
She still looks great, and she's got to be my, not my age, but in her 70s, I could say.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt. So
she could be 80.
Yeah.
Yeah, she could. 77, something like that.
I liked her because if she wanted to tell you to go fuck yourself, she
Oh,
did.
I
She
was
was
on a shoot where she
very
did.
verbal
She
and very,
told the director to go fuck himself.
yeah,
Yep.
very opinionated.
He showed up in her her hotel room at that night. He had shot her that day, and he showed up in her hotel room that
Oh,
night.
yeah.
Well, guess what she said?
Get the fuck
And she talked to me about it the next day. She said, "Can you believe he did that?" She was outraged, and I'm like, "Uh-oh." And this was the beginning of my career. It was like the second month I was working, and I'm like, "Okay, this is what this is what it's all about."
Well, tell me about Jerry Hall. Jerry
So
Hall
what
was,
what I remember about Jerry was that she was very careful about her beauty. She had her very, very long hair to her waist. She wore it a particular way every single day. And she had that great accent, that Texas accent. She was funny. She was she was absolutely adorable. She, Jerry Hall, was on the Veronica Hamill shoot that I did for Vogue. So Veronica Hamill is the older model doing her very last shoot, and Jerry is 16 years old. She's walking now. Rico Pullman's the photographer. Anna Wintour is the editor for Bizarre. Sorry, it was
wow.
not Vogue, it was Bizarre. Anna Winter editor, Rico Pullman, and Jerry Hall walks onto the beach with a stack of comic books. She's 16 years old. She's got a stack of comic books under her arm. And she said, "Here, Antonio told me to pose like this." And she wanted the photographer, Rico Pullman, to look through her comic books to see how she should pose. And remember, Anna just, I don't even, it was a moment I could never forget. And Jerry was Jerry. They gave her fabulous clothes, like fur stoles, and she would walk around being Jerry the way Antonio taught her to be. And so I was just lapping it all up because she was the pinnacle of glamour to me. So I was, oh, this is heaven for me.
Wow.
Veronica Hamill leaving and Jerry Hall coming in, and there I was,
Well,
right in my lap.
at Ford, we represented Jerry Hall. She was with us for a whole career. And I never forget, I went to Paris to look for guys one year. And this was in my early career. And Eileen said, go to this agency called Prestige. Now, Prestige was a little agency, but she hated the guy who ran it. She didn't like the guy. He had come to see her, and there was some. Eileen had a likes and dislikes. And if she disliked somebody, that was the end of it. So she says, Joe, go there. I heard he's got a great girl. So sure enough, I went and looked at guys, and I realized Jerry Hall was there, and I saw Jerry Hall. And I came back to Eileen, and I said, Eileen, there's a girl there you got to get. You got to get this Jerry Hall girl. I said, I think she's great. There were a few other girls too, which I was wrong on. I mean,
Who were you
I,
wrong on?
I wasn't the best picker of women for my 3 marriages. So, I did like what I liked, and uh, I do have but that wasn't my job looking for a woman. And so let me tell you about Jerry. She used to come up the agency, and she used to come a lot of times with Grace Jones. And the two of them were the biggest flirts in the world. Now, they'd go down to the women's division, do what they had to do, and then they come up to the men's division. Now, in the men's division, we had couches where you could sit around, and there were always guys sitting around. There were never women sitting around downstairs because they were busy working. The guys, whenever they were not working, were hanging out in the agency. And sure enough, Jerry and Grace would come up there and turn everybody on. They would, you know, oh, Jerry with a sexy voice, she would just be telling the boys this and that and that. And they would, oh my God, I think I'm going to make out with her. Oh, I think I'm going to make out with Grace Jones. The two of them were all over the guys. And all of a sudden, they'd get up and Jerry would say, bye. And she was out the door. And the guys would look at me and I said, I told you so.
She was a tease.
A real big tease.
She was but she was fabulous, one of a kind, and Grace Jones was fabulous too. I met Grace in a hair salon called St. Andre, and if you lived in New York City in 1972, you got your hair cut at St. Andre and blown out like Farrah Fawcett style. And so Grace and I used to wait for our boyfriends because Grace's boyfriend owned St. Andre, and my boyfriend Xavier was one of their biggest hair cutters. So we used to talk about how much we loved our boyfriends and stuff like that, and it was just sweet and fun. And that's before Grace became who she was.
Yeah.
So I didn't know her except for that brief connection.
Yeah.
Way back when. She was in love with a hairdresser.
That's when I knew her too, in the beginning of her career. And she spent a lot of time in the agency. She would come up and she liked one of the guys, Kalani, this guy Kalani, a good-looking guy, Kalani Durden. And they used to hang out a lot together, he and Grace. And I've got a million of those stories, Sandy. Tell me.
Okay.
Celebrities, are you still working with celebrities or certain people right now?
I mean, I met Elizabeth Hurley in 1995 when Albert Watson was shooting her for Estee Lauder. We did all those beautiful campaign ads together. So that was, if you want to talk about being a team, I was part of Albert Watson's team, the makeup artist working with Elizabeth Hurley. And she is the most loyal person. I still work with her. I worked with her maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. She's a spokesperson for breast cancer for Estee Lauder. But I've worked with her through all those 29 years. 29 years, Joey. But no, most of the other people that I've worked with from back then, I don't see anymore. Just Elizabeth and, of course, Christy Brinkley. I mean, Christy and I worked together in the beginning of her career. In 1977, I met Christy Brinkley on a Vogue shoot. The other girl was Iman, and I had met Iman before, and I'd worked with Iman before, but I'd never met Christy. And I'll never forget when Christy approached us at the swimming pool and she smiled, that big Christy Brinkley smile. I thought, you know what? You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And you know what, Joey? I think I was right, because she still looks amazing.
She does. She does.
I did not work with her all throughout those years, but we reconnected around 2015 or 2017, and we've been working steadily since then. So, you know.
Yeah, she maintains herself. She's beautiful. She was beautiful when she first started and she's beautiful now. I've got to say, I haven't seen her in a few years. Maybe, a few years, but she looks great. It looks great from what I've seen of her. I've got a Christy Brinkley story.
Oh, good.
We were representing Christy Brinkley at Ford, and Marion and I, Jerry and Eileen, happened to be out of town. Heidi Klum came to us because she was with us in Miami, I believe, and wanted representation in New York. So she came in and she was married to a hairdresser.
Rick Pepino.
Rick Pitino, right.
Pepino,
and
yes.
They came up, and we interviewed Heidi, Marion and I. And we looked at her and she looked great. And we said, we'd call you. So when she left, I looked at Marion and Marion looked at me and said, what do we need her for? We have Christy Brinkley. She looks just like Christy Brinkley.
They
In
have
ours,
that same smile.
like, when I say they look alike, it's, when you're in our business, you look for a certain type.
Right.
And she's that type.
Yes.
But at Christy, so we said, we don't need Heidi. And look what happened.
You could have had both.
We could have had both, is right, but we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin, as far as work-wise and recommending different types. But they
come on, admit it, that was a mistake.
Oh, it was a big mistake.
It was a big one. Mistake. It's okay. That's how it goes.
It's one of many mistakes, and I should do a show about mistakes.
Yeah, they're very interesting. So someone here wants a story about Yasmin Ghouri. Do you know Yasmin Ghouri?
Yes, I know of her. Yes, and I believe I've met her a few times.
So I used to work with her. I used to work with Yasmin with Albert Watson, and I just found her to be one of those creatures. She was just perfect. And I never really went to any of the runway shows at the time, so I didn't know how big and how fabulous she was on the runway. I just know her from her print work, and I enjoyed working with her. She's just a special human being. I have met so many fabulous people, and Yasmin is one of them. She really has, you feel something for people.
I looked at Yasmin. We didn't represent her, but she really was the beginning. She was a gorgeous brunette. Let me put that.
Gorgeous, yes.
The beginning of that whole different look of where the blondes were sort of falling along the wayside and the brunettes were taking over.
That's right.
Yasmin started that whole wave of a different look. She started a different look, and it was her olive skin and her brunette hair.
Right.
It paved the way for all the brunettes in the business.
I believe she's from Canada, but she was considered ethnic looking at the time, and that was the early 90s or the late 80s, and she opened up the door for ethnicity, I think, and so did Janice Dickinson.
Yes,
but it didn't really click as hard with Janice as it did for Yasmin. It clicked harder.
And I remember girls like that back in the 70s were called exotic.
Yes. Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I think the only brunette that I knew that worked was Dale Haddon, and there was another girl that was a fabulous brunette.
That you can't be a brunette. I was so.
Oh, Jane Lee.
Who?
Lee.
Who?
Jane Lee Salmons.
Oh, I don't know her, but I remember Carol Alt telling a story. When she first started working, her agent told her, "You're not going to." I mean, they said to her at the agency, "You're not going to work that much because you're a brunette. I think they said we'll take you, but you're not. You're a brunette, so you're not going to work." Can you imagine?
That's the truth. Well, look, in the 60s when I was modeling, I couldn't do catalog because I had dark hair and olive skin. So I never did catalog in the early 60s until the European look came in. And then the catalogs felt they had to book a European looking guy. And here I was, Joey from Brooklyn, who was a European guy.
You can do that look. What about Cheryl Tiegs? Somebody wants to about Cheryl Tiegs.
Cheryl, I saw recently, and she looked great. Cheryl was always quiet, really not as outgoing as other girls. And I think she...
that's a myth.
A little too early.
The quiet is a myth.
Yeah.
That's a myth.
Really?
Because I worked with her with Maury Hobson when Cheryl signed on for Sears. And she had a clothing line for Sears that was very lucrative. And she was also married to Peter Beard. So
it was
Lori and I used to go to Quag. I think it was, it was, I
he
think,
was in Montauk.
Montauk, sorry.
Peter Beer.
Montauk for like weekends in the summertime. And we would just go out there and party and work and party and work. And from 10 a.m. on, it was party and work, party and work. At around 5 o'clock, Bill Connors was the photographer. Around close to 5 p.m. or 4:30 or 4 o'clock, she said, "We've got it." That was it. And then we partied on all night, get the next day, party and work. So not everyone knows that about Cheryl. I don't know if she wants anyone to know that about herself, but she was the fun girl in my career, Cheryl Teagues.
Nice to us in the agency.
So nice.
Sat down and talked. And you mentioned Bill Connors. Bill Connors was a very good friend of mine. I went to Europe with him, to the south of France, when I was scouting and we were vacationing. So he was very close to me. I'll tell you a Cheryl story. Way back when Cheryl was doing CoverGirl, when she first came to Ford, her contract was up for renegotiation. So Jerry and I went up to Gray Advertising. I'll never forget it. Jerry Salvati was a kid from the Bronx who was on the CoverGirl account. So we wanted X amount of dollars, and he said, "You're crazy. We're not giving you that. We're not giving you that for a model." So we said, "She's not just a model." We said, "She's a supermodel." And they said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "That's a girl that people know what her name is, where she went to school, what she does, what she eats, who she goes out with, and all that." He said, "You're crazy. Nobody knows. She's just another blonde in an ad." So we walked out. He did a focus group, and he realized that everybody knew
Who
that was
Cheryl Teagues was, right.
So he came back to us and said he's going to give us the money, but he wants to use her name. And we said, "That's perfect."
Yes.
He's right into it.
Yes.
And Cheryl got the new CoverGirl contract, and they used her name. And that's when they started using names of models. And then everybody started to know who this girl is, and not just a pretty face, and not just a blonde or a brunette or whatever. And to me, that was the beginning of when, the paved the way for supermodels.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They put names underneath those faces, and that did it.
Yeah, and then the kids said, "Oh my God, I want to be like her. Oh, she goes to the beach a lot. Oh, she tans this way. Oh, this is what she did in school, and this is her boyfriend. Oh man, he's
her makeup. They copied her hairdo. They copied everything. And Cheryl is 6 feet tall in her stocking feet.
Yes.
She really is a knockout. She really.
Her and Elle McPherson were the two tallest girls I know in the business. Elle was tall too.
And they did very well. What about Verushka? Did you know Verushka, or that before your time?
I really don't. When Verushka was modeling, I was modeling. And of course, I was a junior, and I couldn't work with a Verushka because she was always He was too old for me, even though she was 20 years old.
Right.
Old. But in the business, she did the high fashion, and I did the junior stuff. Looking around corners, jumping on, trampoline, holding the girl, and looking at a sweater and stuff like that. So, no, I didn't know her, but she did. I was living in a building on 55th Street, and Horse had his studio upstairs, and she would come in and she worked for him a lot. She did work for him a lot. And that was my only contact with her. Now, tell me something. Let's get back to hair, to makeup. Do you see a difference in the models and the women who want to wear makeup like the models, or do you see them differently than you did before? Did you make them up differently back then than you do now?
I want to say yes, but the answer really might be no, because makeup is very trendy. I mean, it's classic. There are classic looks,
Right.
okay? And then there are trends, and I love following trends. So I always incorporate a little bit of those trends, even into the women that I make up now, who are all over 50. So, you know, look, lip gloss goes in style and out of style, and I'll know that. So, I mean, and women over 50 sometimes do care and sometimes don't care. And I can kind of judge who does care and who doesn't. I do care. So I will try to keep them up to fashion as much as I can. And it works. It really does work. Uh, so I think the answer is no, Joey. I still do what I've done since the day I started work in 1969. No, since the real day I started work in 1973 doing a cover of Vogue with Karen Graham and Scavullo. And so I look at that makeup today and I say, I could I could still do that makeup today. I look at the makeup I did then and I say I could still do it today. So makeup goes in and out of fashion. So right now, my old makeup is in fashion.
Is in fashion.
Yeah, right
Well, what
now.
I'm saying is that you tweak it a little.
Yes.
You,
Yes. I
you
mean, there has
trends,
been
so
weird. Sorry.
you tweak it in order to
Yes.
go along with it. Well, that's great. I think I love the way the girls look in ads these days. You know, uh, uh, I came from looking at a certain size and a certain type all my
Oh, I
life.
see what you're saying. I see what. So now it's all inclusive. Yes, I understand.
Inclusive and lots of different types and lots of different,
Right.
well, you know, lots of different makeup too. I find out now, I see a lot of really over the head, you know, or out of sight makeup. You know, I mean, just it looks almost like a clown. You know, a lot of these people
Oh,
put
yeah,
on
you
so
see that
much.
on Instagram. You see that on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram you see it, and you know, at the Met Gala you see it too. You know,
Oh,
whereas
oh, of
people, yeah,
course,
the
of course.
carpet, I should say, where you see with this outrageous stuff, and I don't believe people follow that, but I mean, I think it's done for
Well,
shock value.
it's really, really in style right now, and it takes a lot of talent to do that very well. That's not the kind of makeup artist I am really. I'm a more, down to earth makeup artist, but I did a job with Eddie Tricome about a month ago for the Brooklyn Museum, and it was for a solid gold exhibit that they'll be having in November. And they wanted the girls to be all gold. So I kind of went to town with that look. And that look is sort of what you would say could go to the Met Gala. So that really over the top kind of makeup, which was invented in the 60s, remember,
Yeah,
is coming back. It's coming back. And it, believe me, I worked hard that day for the Brooklyn Museum, but I don't think I did enough. I'd like to do it over again, guys.
you know. So you mentioned Ed Tricome or Edward Tricome.
Yes.
Was really big when I was an agent, and you know, not that he was big. I knew of him because I was an agent, and he worked a lot doing hair, and he still has a salon, and he's still
Yes.
doing hair.
Beautiful salon on Madison Avenue. Yes. And
Yeah,
he cut
he's a
my hair.
he cuts your hair.
Yeah.
Looks great,
Thank you.
Sandy. You know, he really did a
Anyway.
good job. Now there was a colorist too that was fabulous. I forget his name. You may have worked with him.
Louis Licari.
Lakari. Yep, that's it.
He's a great guy. I haven't seen him in
Yeah,
years. He moved out to
yeah.
LA. I
And neither,
I don't know if he's back in New York. He's always been bi-coastal. buy something, you know.
Well, Sandy, I think we're gonna. I mean, I don't want to repeat ourselves, but I think you've had an amazing life. You've have a
Well,
lot
you have.
of stories, and I think the both of us grew up in this business, and it seems like all these years later, we're still in the business.
Yeah.
You know, even though maybe if we were worked for a company, we would have retired. But the key is when you don't work for a company and you work for yourself, you seem to never retire because everything gets old and everything gets new. So I really appreciate you being here and thank you for your insight to all this. I don't think I've missed anything or there's anything that you can think of, but I think we
No,
covered
I
everything.
think we covered it. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.